Welcome to the MMHP in the 989, channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history. Recorded live from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located inside the Bay County Historical Museum
from the city by the bay.
Featuring Dr. J, Fred Reif, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker. Brought to you by the 989 Podcast Network and the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located at the Bay County Historical Society Museum at 321 Washington Avenue, Bay City, Michigan.
Okay, well, we're broadcasting tonight from the Historical Museum of Bay County and the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame with our special guest, Ed Roth.
Hey, Ed.
Hey, Scott.
Hey.
We're here.
Great. We're all back here. We got a summer session with the doctor in the house. Two doctors now.
There we
I don't
go.
know if we're going to handle all this doctorism.
We're doing doctoring tonight?
Well, mine's more of a nickname. That
Dr. J.
Doc, yeah.
Dr. J. Basketball and music.
Hey,
musicologist. No, this is cool. We were talking before you got here. Fred's had this one in the works. Fred, tell us a little bit about your nephew. A special episode.
I've known Ed my whole life. I remember when he got his first drum kit. And is that when you decided to get more into music?
Therapy? Actually, when you said that to me earlier about my first drum kit, I wonder if what you're thinking of is that blue Vistalite.
Yeah, it was blue.
Actually, my very first drum kit was one that I borrowed from him. Because I was in like the 7th grade band or something, the school band, and the band director was going to do a medley of some Michael Jackson songs.
Well,
that's early 80s.
Okay, of course,
And
Michael Jackson.
And they're still doing it.
They're still doing it, yeah. And he asked the percussion section, anybody who knows how to play the drum kit. Well, I wanted to play, and so I said, I do, and I didn't. And I had to, and I knew there was a drum set in my grandparents' house. And so I went over there and had to learn how to play the drum set really fast. And I think you either loaned it to me or I just went over to the house and practiced for a while, enough to get, some coordination. So that was in some ways my very first drum kit.
In 7th grade?
7th or 8th grade. It was middle school.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So this is in Saginaw?
At Bridgeport, actually.
Oh, Bridgeport.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I never really understood because I always had a Saginaw address, but for whatever reason I went to Bridgeport schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like Essexville Garber and you live in Hampton, but you got a Bay City address.
Probably something like that.
There's always that little mix and match.
Yeah. I lived a block off of Genesee, so it's close enough to Saginaw to me.
Oh, yeah.
Wow,
That house.
What's that?
I forgot about that house.
Right. That's the only one I knew. Yeah.
So that was the beginning. Did you end up playing in a band in junior high or high school once you started banging on the drums?
Do you know something? I got in so much trouble with the drums, some of which is probably podcastable and some of it may not be. But I never played in like a rock band or that kind of thing. There were some startups, in the garage that we were also oriented as percussionists and that whole scene, orchestras, bands, that kind of stuff. Sometimes people would ask, hey, we need a band for such and such event. So we would just put something together. Mm-hmm. And so there was never any kind of steady group that we had steady gigs, but we played all sorts of, high school graduation parties. And in fact, I think I dragged a drum set up here the night of my graduation because somebody had a parent had a house up here. Yeah. So
Ed, we're interested in exploring how you got into trouble.
Oh, yeah. Well, what kind of reach does this podcast
Let's
have?
dig the dirt out now.
So the small trouble will be things like my mom driving me to marching band rehearsal, I guess it was, and I thought I was behind, and we were going to get grilled. These high school marching band directors can be a little tough, and so I was practicing on the dashboard of the car. Well, that was a bad idea because the dashboard was made out of some kind of fragile something or other. And I wasn't watching, I was only listening. And then by the time I opened my eyes, I had obliterated her dashboard. I mean, just broke it into 100 pieces. And then we got there, I was like, sorry, Mom. And I went to rehearsal. Yeah, I kind of forgot about it, but she reminded me about it. Yeah.
Once you get in the car, you kind of...
Yeah, it's the constant reminder, right?
Yeah. And then other stuff was like not my trouble, but I was close to it. So I moved to New York for a while, and as a music therapist, that was my full-time job, but I was on these sub lists for like Broadway, off-Broadway shows. And so I did Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It was a tour, like a 2-week tour. And man, those theater folks are not musician people. I just remember eyes wide open on a bus, like, whoa. Look, man, I played the bass drum. I can't get involved. So there was trouble around me that I wasn't always immediately connected to.
Okay. Were you living in New York when you sat in with us that time? I think that was in Philadelphia.
It was in Philly, and there's a couple things I remember about that. And one, he don't want me to tell the back end of that, but so one, we show up and I had sneakers on, and they wouldn't let me in the club because the early part of the night, it was like a supper club, African American supper club, and so they were all in like, silk suits and shoes, man, really dressed and all the other guys had like black shoes on. Well, I had a pair of sneakers, and they're like, you can't come in. And so I don't know if it was you or Rob, one of the guys in the band, like, well, he has to come in. He's a drummer. And they would not let me in. So I took my shoes off, and I had just black socks. And so one of the things I remember about it, when that ended, it was maybe around midnight, then a whole new crowd came in. And it was like all these kids, like college students and like white 20-something-year-old kids. And I think the invitation was to play the first song of the second set.
Something like that.
And I was, youngish, 23, 24, and I was trying to be Mr. Big Shot, and I was playing all this offbeat. And this is not what they wanted or needed. And Lazy Lester was yelling at me saying something, and I couldn't understand him. He just kept saying, "Come on, what?" And he yelled like, "Come on, and I turned to the guitar. I'm like, "What's he saying?" And the guitarist said, like, "He wants you to hit the one." Because I was doing all this funky stuff, and I felt embarrassed because I didn't know if it made you feel bad, like, you brought this kid here and he messed it up, so that's one thing I remember about it. Yeah, and that gig went kind of late, 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
What about those two gals?
Okay, see, he didn't want me to leave it out. He wanted to make sure I mentioned it.
It's a good story.
Okay,
I'd still tell it.
I bet you do. See, now he wants me to put it onto a recording. Okay, all right. So the gig's over. It's kind of late, 2-3 in the morning, and I was the drummer. And these two young women about my age started walking towards, and they had this kind of directionality. I thought, okay, they're walking towards me. And they walked towards me, and then they got to me, they just kind of went right around me. And so I looked over my shoulder to see where they went, and they went right to him, who at the time was probably about the age I am now, okay? All right, so I was like, well, let's see what this is all about. But I'm already in a little bit of a huff, right? And so I'm packing up my drums, and I hear one of them say, like, "Hey, so, what do you call this thing?" And then the full court press comes on. He goes, "Well, a lot of people call this the washboard, but, in the biz, we call it the rub board." And I was like, in the biz?
That's beautiful.
In the biz, what?
We needed that.
Yeah. And then she goes something like, "Well, show me how to play it." And he was like, "Okay." And he put the thimbles on, stuff. And he goes, and then he just makes some rhythms. 'Cause he put the thing. And she goes, no. And so she kind of like backs up into him, and she says, no, show me how to play it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Arms around him.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, once I got done, I said, "Hey, listen, man, good luck. I can't deal with this." I took the next train back to New York. Now, that last part, I don't know if that last part really happened or not. I probably went back to the hotel and spent the night, but it makes for a good story.
It does.
I just split.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, you went back. I remember you came to our motel room.
Oh, so I did go back then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you did go back.
Okay. So somewhere in between.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you were in New York.
That whole
Music therapy, right?
Yeah, that was the coolest time. I was, in my 20s, and because I was trained as a therapist, I had a full-time clinical job at a children's hospital. But what was really cool about it as a 20-something is that the shift didn't start till 1:30 in the afternoon. So I worked from 1:30 in the afternoon till 9:30 at night in Westchester County. It's just north of New York. And so when the shift got done, on the nights where I had gigs in the city, I could just take the train, be down there, and hit the 11:30 midnight set, work till whatever, 2 or 3 in the morning. And I never had to take a gig I didn't want. Like a lot of my friends who were professional performing musicians, they would take all these lousy gigs so they could just make some money and get their name and, get themselves out there. But I wasn't out there for that. I was out there to be a therapist, so I only performed the kind of stuff I wanted to.
That's cool.
Get back to Westchester, whatever, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, sleep full 8 hours, wake up at noon, and just walk right across the street to the hospital. It was a great time.
That's how you got the gig with the rubboard master here? And,
that's what did it, man. That's what landed me that gig.
Okay.
Well,
we
another
didn't know you were such a chick magnet with that rubboard.
There's another one.
I can tell you some stories.
Well, now.
That's the book that's coming back after the next book.
Right.
But was that the same time I came to where you were working?
Yeah.
And you were...
He remembers all these ones that involve women.
This is good.
No, there wasn't any women.
Oh, yeah, there was one. Maybe I never told you this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tell me now. But you had all these kids, like handicap or whatever it's called now. And you started playing some music, and all of them just got
into it. Yeah.
And I thought, it really works.
Yeah. You guys want me to start with the therapy story, or
did he pull out the rub board when that happened and I ran the other way?
No.
So
and then you're like, okay, I see the difference here.
So one of my colleagues, the art therapist, her name was Christina, and she was from Argentina.
Christina from Argentina. There's a song there.
Man, Christina from Argentina. And afterwards, she kept asking me, like, hey, who's that guy you're with? Oh, it's my uncle. It's my mom's brother. Yeah. He's like, you tell me now?
You telling me now?
Yeah. And she's like, oh, wow, your uncle. I was like, well, what's he's a musician. And I was like, oh, she had a thing for musicians. And so, yeah. Anyway, so that happened, man.
Well, man.
Yeah.
But is that where you went to school? I mean, out there?
No, I went to school at Western Michigan.
Oh, right. Okay.
Well, how did you get started in the therapy using music?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of I'm trying to think when I first heard of that.
Yeah.
Might have been like the 80s or 90s or something like. Was that around the time that became more accepted as the therapy tool?
It's tough to say because that acceptance thing is still ongoing.
Okay.
But when I hear other colleagues who are, let's say, occupational therapists, for instance, of which there are several 100,000 in the United States, even they feel like that they're kind of, step kid kind of things, that type of deal. For us, I don't think we've quite hit 11,000 yet, but we're somewhere around 10 to 11,000 music therapists in the entire country. But back then, I mean, the way I got into it was this is back when you registered for courses like in person, and you got in lines and you hope that there was still
exactly.
You guys know what I'm talking about,
yeah.
Right? There's not like going online and you look like, oh, there's no space available, so you just move on. No, you waited in line.
Yeah.
You could have been the last one. And so I didn't know anything. I was a first generation college student. Nobody told me about any of this stuff. And so I just looked for anything with an MUS prefix, knowing it had something to do with music. And I started taking all these music courses and then some gen eds. And I did that for 2 years. And finally, the advisor in the School of Music took me and a buddy of mine who went on to become a professional jazz drummer aside and said, hey boys, like, you need to declare a major. And we were like, haven't we? We've been taking music classes for 2 years. We're music majors. And she was like, yeah, there's no such thing. Like, there's music education, jazz studies, music performance, music therapy, music theory. And I was like, what? Music what? And she said, music therapy. And so I started asking questions. And all I really wanted to do, kind of coming out of that neighborhood in Saginaw, was to help in some way.
Yeah.
My first declared major was actually criminal justice.
Okay.
Because I had a bunch of friends who, like, one day you just didn't see them, and after 4 or 5 days you start asking around, like, hey man, what happened to Derek? I don't know, he went away. And he would stay away. And so there was a lot of that kind of stuff that would happen. And so I was like, this was the time of like Miami Vice. I'm going to be a big, vice cop kind of thing. And I took one criminal justice course, and realized I discovered I had an aversion to getting shot at.
Yeah.
And the only thing I knew was music. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I heard this word, music therapy. And I started taking the classes, and I thought, man, this is voodoo.
Was Western Michigan kind of a leader, because there couldn't have been that many schools that probably offered that at that time.
This would have been, so I started in 1988. Okay. So I would have become a therapy major in 1990.
2 years later. Okay.
Yeah, because my son went to Western Michigan, and I think that's where I first heard it, because he had a friend, Holly Jacobs, who had mentioned something about music therapy. I don't think she went into it. Okay. Maybe she took a class or something like that. This would have been, oh boy, what I'm trying to think.
They would have been 91, because I would have been their first year of college, 91 or 92.
Yeah, okay.
Because they graduated in 90, I was 91.
Well, we would have crossed paths for sure.
Yeah, because they were in music theater.
Oh,
my son and
Holly. Maybe not. That's a different building.
Right.
They would have taken maybe some like music theory classes. This is middle C on a piano and the C, that kind of stuff. So we might have been in the building at the same time.
Yeah, I am sure you probably were.
Wow.
Or at least in the vicinity, if not in the same building.
But you know what it did it actually, Gary? So I started taking these classes. I thought this is not for me, man. This is really soft, kind of stuff. But then I took a research class, and I started to see the evidence. And I'm like, we might be onto something here. And I made it all the way to your first practicum, like when you first start working with patients. Mm-hmm. And the first couple of weeks, I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And you start seeing people respond to music in ways that are musical but have some non-music purpose. Yeah,
I guess what did the research show? I mean, how does music work? Like it becomes such a tool that it works within the brain.
Yeah, at the time, none of that brain research existed. It was just sort of you expose people to some kind of music, and then you observe their non-musical behavior and what's ever relevant for them. So if it's, let's say it was somebody who had anxiety, the research back when I was in school would have been measuring stuff like sweat on your fingertips, which is a measurement of anxiety, and they use different things now. But you say, wow, look at this. When people listen to their preferred music, regardless of tempo and key and all that stuff, if they like it, those physiologic measures of anxiety and stress actually decrease.
Okay.
Now it's much more sophisticated. Some of the research that I have done in the last couple of years, like I've gone in and done taken blood from people and then have them, let's say like the one I did with some singers. So I drew blood and then had them sing a song from a page, pre-written kind of deal, but they were sight reading it. Draw some more blood so then I can compare what was going on with them in their neurochemistry before and after they made music.
Wow.
And in that neurochemistry were things like pleasure responses, anxiety, things like cortisol. But what I was really interested in was the social part. And so maybe you heard of this, the hug hormone or the love drug, this thing called oxytocin. And it is really amped up when people feel bonded and connected. And you see it at like concerts. Mm-hmm. You see it when people are moving in synchrony with each other. And when it occurs naturally is when mothers deliver babies, and they just produce all this oxytocin that bonds them to the infant. And the father also, if the father's present, also has this rush of oxytocin. Well, for some bizarre reason, Mother Nature has set us up so that when we make music together, we get flooded with oxytocin, especially if it's music that everybody likes, and from a timing standpoint, like it's really tight. So yeah, I did some of that, and then I did the same thing but had them improvise instead of just sing. They like scattered over it, and it turns out all these markers of interaction and interpersonal bonding are much more amplified when we improvise with each other than when we just make music together.
And you can tell that by taking blood samples.
In the blood, yeah. And actually, though, so here's where we're going next is like, I don't know if you like to do it, if you ever have to go, get labs done, go to the doc. Like there's a little bit of, nobody really likes to get poked, I think. And so there was a method for a long time that was being developed in parallel to blood draw, but they're using saliva. But it wasn't as robust as getting the same kind of outcomes from the blood. But now you can just take some saliva and get the same like amplitude, or you can tell the difference as much as you can with the blood without having to poke somebody.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wish they did that for a lot more things.
Yeah, I know.
For kids' purpose.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So we can do it with that, but I've been doing things like magnetic, like MRI. So basically, one of my colleagues, my primary research colleague, was at Johns Hopkins, who's now at University of California, San Francisco. He, at one point in time, gave like one of the 50 most watched TED Talks of all time, and it was called "This Is Your Brain on Improv." So he took some professional jazz pianists, stuck them in the magnet in the MRI scanner, and then had them improvise. And so he found all this really interesting stuff about creativity. But there was one thing that he observed, but he kind of dismissed it because it wasn't relevant to his study, which was when we make music with each other in back and forth way, trade and forth kind of thing, you can't tell the difference between two musicians' brains and like our brains right now having a discussion. Because that's exactly what's happening. There's that communication network that's in the brain gets activated through that kind of trading force, just like when you're trading language. And so at least for professional musicians, it's the same experience. So we wanted to see what happens in non-professional musicians, because almost none of our patients are musicians. And my daughter was subject number 001. And she was 11, I think, at the time. And we went out to Baltimore, went to Johns Hopkins, put her in a magnet, and had her improvise. And we're shocked. Her brain activation looked exactly like that of the professional jazz musicians while she was improvising with, some music coming out of the control room.
No, was she, she had taken music lessons?
No, she was a complete. In research, they call it. She was musically naive, meaning she had never had any lessons. But what you can do is, like on the piano, if they just play on the black notes, that creates a pentatonic, this 5-tone scale, and there are no wrong notes. You can play them in any order. You can play them together. It all sounds very consonant. It sounds good. And so it's a whole complex thing where you have them play in scalar ways and have them just freely improvise. Yeah, and there's a section of the brain called the default mode network, which gets activated when people are starting to do creative things. So after being in there for a handful of minutes, you could see her default mode network become activated. So she was like in some other place interacting with so she was both being social and creative at the same time.
Wow. Jeez.
Incredible.
So there's some hope for the four of us music junkies.
Come on now.
Who've been listening, to music all
If
these
there's
years.
hope for you, then there's hope for me. So
One thing that struck me of everything you just said here, were you one of the forerunners of the deeper therapy? Are you one of the fathers of this?
music therapy? No, actually it's funny.
I mean, as it got deeper, because obviously you were
the
there
improv
for it.
section of
it.
So there are colleagues all over the world who are studying improvisation. In fact, the way that they practice music therapy is that they only do it through improvisation.
Okay.
So from a lot of people's perspective, that's a little limited. There's all sorts of ways to apply music in a clinical way that does not allow for improvisation. But they studied it more from sometimes almost like a spiritual type of a connection, and it really wouldn't matter what somebody's diagnosis was. They would just treat them for their mental health, and really it's the spiritual thing, and then also behavioral outcomes. But in terms of like measuring the biology, that's
that's where a lot you read about nowadays,
the biology, the brain.
It's the deeper portions of it. So you were there and you helped spearhead some of that, and that's magical, man.
Yeah, man.
The 90s, mid-90s?
So actually, whichever President Bush was president in 1990, probably.
That would be the first
The
Bush.
first Bush, yeah. He actually declared the 1990s the decade of the brain. And I think what that meant was that the National Institutes of Health appropriated some tens of millions of dollars into neuroscience research.
Wow, right place, right time, man.
Yeah. And so at that time, I would have still been a full-time therapist. But I went back to grad school at the end of the 90s, and I thought, like, okay, I'll do this, and maybe I'll go to med school. But man, when that neuroscience research came out, it just like took off, and it was so interesting to me. I was like, well, there goes my career as a doc and all that doc money.
Did you find the phone ringing a lot?
At that time, not so much. It takes a while as an academic, and as a first gen college student, nobody taught me how to I could barely be a student, let alone a professor. It took me a while, and then, this was really at the advent of the internet also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man, yeah.
But once the invitation started, then they just kept on. Yeah. So it's been incredible. We were talking earlier before the recording started. Like I taught in Australia for 4 or 5 months, and I taught in Spain 5 or 6 times, and it's just been incredible. And I thought, I wonder if my mother's forgiven me for that dashboard incident yet.
Yeah. So what kind of courses are you teaching? How does that work? You were invited to go to Australia to be an instructor?
Yeah, so one of my Australian colleagues who I met at Oxford University, actually, we were both there at a conference, and I gave a presentation, she gave a presentation. She was getting ready to go on sabbatical. She liked whatever I had to say, and she said, hey, listen, I'm going on sabbatical. Could you entertain the idea of coming to Australia and teaching for me while I'm on sabbatical?
What exactly course did you teach then?
Yeah, so at that time, that was an introduction to this model of music, this neurologic music therapy. So there's a lot of like basic neural perception of music, and then how to translate that into care for people with traumatic brain injuries, Parkinson's, people who've had strokes, Huntington's disease, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my mother suffered from Parkinson's. How would that work to treat a Parkinson's?
Okay, good. So you have
patient?
So you'll be able to relate to this then. So people with Parkinson's, one of the most profound things that you can watch is that they tend to, of course it's not everybody, but they tend to take very short steps, and also a little faster than maybe you and I would walk, and they also walked with this stooped posture. Mm-hmm. So what's happening is this neurochemistry system that produces a drug called dopamine, which, as you may have heard, being with right. So the dopamine gets depleted. And one of the roles dopamine plays is to give us a sense of physical balance. It facilitates our motor behavior, in addition to all this other stuff that we hear about now, pleasure. Well, the short of it is, Gary, is that when we hear rhythmic music, what happens, sound comes in through our ear, goes through the auditory nerve, and down our spinal cord, out to the musculature, before it actually goes up to the brain for processing. So if you ever find yourself like you're tapping your foot or you're tapping your hand, and then you realize like, oh, I wonder how long I've been doing that. it happens like whatever word you like best. It's unconscious, or it's subconscious, or precognitive, all this stuff. All it means is basically is that sound excites those neurons in the spinal cord faster than it does up in the brain. And it has to, because it's evolutionary kind of thing. Our ancestors heard like in the woods or the jungle, they couldn't take the time to turn and look down and say, oh, that's a snake. Oh, that's a poisonous snake. I should move away. you need to hear and move. And so now at this stage, we can hijack it basically with a pulse. And so for people who have Parkinson's, unlike people who've had a stroke, often what you need to do is slow their cadence. You have to slow the number of steps per minute that they take down. And simply by doing that, you actually cause their stride length to become longer. By increasing their stride length, it actually improves their balance. So I don't know if your mom was a fall risk or not.
Well, yeah, as it progressed, definitely.
And also stand up
when
straight.
you're doing the therapy,
Yeah.
they're listening to music at the same time. Is this kind of how it's done?
Yep. So what happens is it's all like, you really don't need music for to cue somebody to walk. A metronome is fine, but nobody can do 20 minutes of walking 3 times a day for 6 weeks of therapy to a metronome. Then they become a different kind of patient, right? So basically what we do is we figure out what their natural cadence, the natural number of steps per minute is, back off of it into something that's healthier, embed that metronome at that beats per minute rate, and then put some music on it that they like, that's you modify with some software, at that tempo. So they're basically, all they feel like is that they're walking. And if you Google right now, like music therapy and Parkinson's and gait or something, you'll see a lot of these videos are like, there's one that comes up all the time of a physical therapy aide who read a paper about this kind of thing and said, I'm going to do this with my patient who has Parkinson's. And she asked him, what do you like? And he told her. And so she turned this piece of music on and the guy took off. And from my perspective, you can see exactly what's happening. Like his central nervous system synchronized to the beat of the music, but it was way too fast. So then what he did, and he didn't consciously do this. This all happened, at the brain, at the subcognitive level. Then he tried to walk half time. So instead of like walk, 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 he tried to walk, 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 but the beat was too slow. And so then you could just see him become completely off balance. But a trained music therapist would have never made that error because we would have known to do the assessment, give the music that's at the right pace, understand the mechanism. So you can actually go to an insurance company and say, here's what's going on in the biology, and here's the level of predictability that this is going to actually occur, so that you can get paid, which means that person gets the service.
Okay.
Wow.
That's the deal. Like, it's not music therapists tend to be warm, fuzzy, really smart, but they're do-gooders. Sometimes the problem is they don't want to ask for the money, or, I don't want to ask for too much money, but you can't give a service if you're not getting paid for it, because then you can't live. Yeah. So
right.
we're, to a large extent, we're beyond that, but man, that's one tiny example. We could be here all night long. There's so many.
So,
like that.
Insurance companies, you're saying they might be more open to paying for drugs rather than for that kind of treatment.
I had an experience actually as an intern at the University of Michigan Medical Center, where my special project was to work with people as they were going into surgery. And so basically we would do some music reinforced relaxation, like outside the OR. I would accompany them into the operating room.
Well,
so we keep the relaxation going, and I improvise on a guitar, on some major set, pentatonic kind of stuff, all the nice flowy. While they're in the middle of surgery, we're still practicing the relaxation, and while they're coming out, we built a step on the bed thing, and I basically rolled out with them, and we kept the relaxation going. And the data I collected was sort of their sense of pain, like how much pain did I feel, and then also what was the volume of pain medicine that they took. And of course, the people that I worked with reported a lot less pain, and they needed a lot less pain meds than the people that didn't. Just went,
Right.
And
of course, Big Pharma probably doesn't like that too much.
Well,
they would rather use the medication.
As a 22-year-old intern, I had no idea why I was told I needed to stop. I said, but it's working. I'm really helping. And they're like, yeah, go help over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see where that would probably be. Some people would immediately think it's kind of wacky, or
But guys,
like
listen, that was, I mean, I was an intern 32 years ago. Man, that vibe just, I'm sure it exists, but it is just not there. I have colleagues who are medical music therapists. This is what they do. The pain teams call them in. Where music therapists are integrated into a lot of that care now.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. You can even
I
request
saw
it
some of that on
sometimes.
TV before, or where they accompany an acoustic classical guitar,
Yeah.
or a CD, like their headphones are out, like listening,
Right.
So our speakers, and they're walking with them.
Yeah.
I've seen some of that on something I don't remember, but
There is a video that a colleague of mine in the Bronx, you remember Oliver Sacks by any chance? He was a neurologist.
No.
So you might remember, and you don't know that you remember. So Robin Williams played him in a movie called Awakenings.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so
that I
Oliver was
remember.
the doctor that Robin played,
Okay.
and he worked at Beth Abraham Hospital in the Bronx. And what he sort of accidentally discovered that, whoa, why is it that when this musician comes in, this is kind of pre-music therapy, when this musician comes in, that all of a sudden, all these patients of mine who have Parkinson's, who are either what they used to just refer to it, who are catatonic, suddenly become animated, and some of them actually get up and start walking. And then all of a sudden they stop playing and, go back into this withdrawal. And so Dr. Sachs was the guy who either invented or was involved with the development of something called levodopa, which is synthetic dopamine. That probably your mom took as a med.
Probably,
or
yeah.
some kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Oliver, if you want to talk about people who are really influential, Dr. Sachs was very influential, even though he wasn't a music therapist, because I think it was maybe 1991, he went in front of Congress and testified and got music therapy identified as a approved profession in the some kind of an aging care act or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, I recommend that every site in the United States that treats people of age, hire not only their music therapist, but their team of music therapists. So one step forward.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it then this develops into dealing with addiction as well. That's kind of an offshoot of this original research.
Some of that is what I'm a little bit more connected to. So some of the idea is around music therapy and addiction. One that probably won't work is that the amount of dopamine that engaging in music produces probably wouldn't be enough to replicate or give somebody the same kind of experience they would with some class
with the drug,
of drugs.
right.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the hope for a while when we discovered, like, wow, actually look at what's happening in the neurochemistry of people who are involved in making music, or even if they're just listening to music they like, is there's this flood of dopamine. But if you know anything about addiction, like some of those, especially things like meth, drugs like that, they burn out those dopamine receptors. And so you can't really produce enough. So one idea is that it came from a study with animal models, with rats. And so you have two environments. One is very antiseptic. There's nothing in it. It's just a kind of a bin, and there's two like water bottles in there. One of them is laced with cocaine, and the other one is just water. So in the environment where the rats are isolated and it's very plain, the rats go over and they find the one, they identify, oh, this one, cocaine in it. I like the way that makes me feel, and they keep hitting it until they overdose. The ones that are in an environment that's really engaging and interesting and there's other rats for them to hang out with, they go over there and they hit that one with cocaine. They go, whoa. And then they're like, yeah, it's not for me. They go back to the one with water and they don't become addicted. About 10% of them do, just like in the human population.
Okay.
Wow.
So the idea is if you put somebody in a stimulating environment with rich social interactions, and that's really where my research is right now, and with music therapy with people with all sorts of mental health, and particularly with addiction, is the interactivity, the interaction part of making music together.
Yeah, you can see that's difficult because once somebody is addicted, then they're probably staying away from
Sometimes
that social interaction.
it's heavy, man, because sometimes, it's all sorts of things. Shame kind of causes people to isolate sometimes. But if they get into some, like they go to NA, AA, that kind of thing, they learn like, no, I need to be amongst people. I need to contribute. Yeah. I need to allow them to contribute to my life. So it just depends where you are on that spectrum.
So that does the music therapy help them maybe want to go to AA or NA or anything like that? Have you seen a connection where?
Oh yeah. It's hard to put a bow on it, kind of a thing, to make it tidy, but there is some of that. Like, I like the way I feel when I go to this place, if you just put simple terms on it. So compliance, just like with taking meds. What do doctors say? If I could just get my patients to take their meds the way I told them, they'd be right. Yeah. And so, compliance is a thing. And so if they like the way they feel when they go to these meetings while they're making music, then it's more likely that they're going to show up and be compliant with the program. That's one way, but you can use like songwriting as a way for them to express emotions, express their thoughts.
Well, how about people that aren't musically inclined? I mean, if somebody is not a musician, you still would encourage them to try to write a song, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. 99% of the people I worked with were not musicians. I've hardly ever worked with somebody who, I mean, we're all musicians, believe it or not. Like, just by the nature of being human, there is musicianship in us. There's something like, I don't know if you ever heard this word, amusia. You ever hear that?
No.
So if you're in if you have amusia, it means one of a couple things. One, either you can hear a pulse, but not hear it as a pulse the way you and I would feel it. Mm-hmm. You could hear changes in dynamics and go, that's weird, it's getting louder, or it's getting quieter, but not feel what we feel from dynamic changes. And so they don't hear music as music, they just hear it as sound.
Oh, okay.
And it's only like 1.5% of a population has that. So almost all of us are musicians in one way or another.
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
Yeah. So
we all have a pulse, we all have a beat in us. I can see that.
Like, if I start doing this, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't bang on the table. If I start doing this, you all will start filling in beats.
Yep.
Or whatever it is that's going on in your head. They would just hear and they could see like, well, I can tell he's clapping steadily or something, but they would not feel that there's a groove, that there's a pulse. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a weird thing. There's not that many people who have it. Again, it's a really small percentage. And even then, sometimes it's mistaken as it's an attention issue. They're just not really paying attention.
Okay. Wow.
Anyways, the point is that almost none of the people we actually work with are musicians.
Okay.
Trained anyways.
And the music therapy also helps family members that might be living with an addict?
Yeah, and outside of addiction too. Like, I worked in pediatrics for a long, long time, and you ever want to feel unsteady, have a kid who has some serious health issue, and then the kid picks up on the fear of the parents or the anxiety of the parents, and the kid becomes fearful and the kid becomes anxious, and it becomes this really big cycle. So sometimes it's like you engage the parents with a child, for instance, for anxiety purposes. Mm-hmm. And you get that cycle started by actually calming the parents down first, and they see the kids having a good time and laughing, where everything else is like, I'm afraid of all these people in white coats, and they're going to come poke me, and here's somebody in a healthcare environment who's taking care of me and giving me choices, like I can pick this instrument or that instrument or play this song or that song, and everybody starts feeling better. So there's that.
Okay.
I have colleagues who work in hospice who help family members process either the imminent or recent passing of a family member. If there is disconnect between people in a family, sometimes they actually will either make music together or write songs to bring that disconnect, some resolution.
That's interesting.
Sometimes it's heavy, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I give you examples of like rhythm-based stuff or people who have stroke. Now that's heavy in its own way, but when you're talking about, end-of-life care, man, yeah. So I have colleagues, a lot of colleagues. In fact, that's been the fastest-growing area of care in music therapy for a decade. There are students now who show up 18 years old, and you ask them like, okay, so how long have you known about music therapy? Oh, since I was a little kid. Wow, really? Well, how long have you known you want to do it? Since I was 14 years old. Like, what? Okay, great. Do you know like who you want to work with? Yes, I want to work with hospice. You're 18 years old. What? And they're like, yeah, my grandmother, when she was in passing, she was in hospice, and I just remember how it made us feel, and I could see it made my grandmother more relaxed, and we all,
That's wild.
We're still sad, but we were hopeful, and yeah.
How cool.
18 years old sometimes they come in. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it really covers I'm so grateful you didn't ask me that, like, what is music therapy? Because it'd be like asking a doctor, so what is medicine? So much of it depends on who you work with, meaning what population you work with and what you're actually trying to accomplish. But the core of it is that we, all the bumper stickers, man, life is music and music is life, and where words leave off, music picks up. It turns out that that's probably not poetry. That's probably biology.
Yeah, well.
The poetry feels nice, but the biology is like, you can hang your hat on that.
Yeah, jeez.
And that's the end of episode 1 with Dr. Ed Roth here in the MMHP in the 989. We've connected the dots with all your favorite musicians, DJs, and everybody connected to the music industry. And now we're going to connect it to why the Michigan music is connected so well to your brains. We all have enjoyed this episode so much. There's so much thorough identification and information from Ed that we are just grateful to hear this. And luckily, Sir Fred was well connected to Ed to give us this chance at the interview. And it's our hope that you'll come back for part 2 here to hear the rest of the story with Ed Roth. This is amazing detail, amazing fluency on why music works so well for us. And another Michigander leading the way. So come back for part 2 here in the MMHP in the 989. And as always, we thank you for listening.
On behalf of our hosts, this podcast wouldn't be here without generosity of the Bay City Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. We'd also like to thank all of our guests, and especially to the listeners. The MMHP is found at 989.network, or where all podcasts can be found. You can find updated information as well as Dr. J and Sir Fred's Picks of the Week on Facebook. Also on Facebook, check out Mr. Mike's Local Music Live series and Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen Studios, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, and Mr. Mike on YouTube as Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1.
On behalf of us hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and myself, we'd like to thank